Hi, welcome to another bit more sporadic all over the video. That's a great start. A bit more of a sporadic all over the place video that I wanted to make because it's just some stuff I wanted to talk about. I've seen plenty of videos like this, and this is by no means reinventing the wheel, but I wanted to talk about a few of the things that I wish I had known sooner about Pathfinder. If the OGL hadn't happened, the scandal a couple of years back, I probably would still just be playing 5e. Well, I was playing less D&D anyway at this point, playing a lot more other systems, but if I was still playing a fantasy system, by standard it would probably still be 5e. Probably 2014, not 2024, let's be honest, but it wouldn't be Pathfinder like it is because of everything that happened. And that's partly because I had invested a lot of money and such into 5e at this point, so it just made sense to keep playing, and I was enjoying it. But these are definitely some of the things that I did not know about Pathfinder, because I'd played 1st edition and then moved to 5e when that came out, and so had a little bit of experience, but 2nd edition and the remaster were very different to 1st edition Pathfinder, and so these are some things that I wish I did know, and I've said that a few times already, which would probably have got me more interested. So if you've come here from any of my videos on Vox Machina or Dungeon Meshi and you don't know that much about Pathfinder, then stick around, you might find this interesting. Otherwise, I feel like I'm probably somewhat preaching to the choir already, but hey, I still think it'll be interesting to see, and I wanted to talk about it. This is in no particular order, and I planned on doing 5 things and immediately did more than that, which, hey, seems to be a trend in these kind of videos. That's what one of the rules law seems to do all the time, so I suppose I'm in good company for it. Number 1 is free stuff. Nearly everything for Pathfinder you can get for free. You do not have to buy the books, you do not have to buy the system. There's a site called Archives of Nethys, which is third-party created, but pretty much officially supported, I believe, which has all the information on classes, backgrounds, weapons, spells, monsters, general rules, literally everything apart from the campaign paths. So the adventure paths, which are campaigns. So you can get everything that you need for Pathfinder absolutely free on there. And then if you just want to run some officially created adventures, then you can buy that. You can buy these as PDFs for Pathfinder as well. You don't have to get everything physical either. And there are also many great resources for creating characters. There is one called Path Builder, which there is a web version and a phone version for Android anyway, sadly not for Apple, but there we go. And you can use this to create characters. Again, third party created, but pretty much officially resourced. That's not the word, but it's got all of that stuff on it because you can get all of that information for free for Pathfinder. There is a single time payment you can pay for on each of those, which gives you a few extra things, but it's perfectly usable without that, and it's not a large investment anyway, and it helps a small business, so it's all good stuff anyway. But the fact that so much of this is free in the first place just means it is actually very accessible, even though at first you might be like, oh, it's a whole new system, I don't want to spend a bunch of money on it. You don't have to. But point number 2, if you want to, the physical books are great quality. I never really clocked that the 5e ones weren't until I started getting them from Pathfinder and from other book creators, but the spines, especially in the quality of the paper, has never been that great in the 5e ones, and they are being sold for similar prices to these. The newer books certainly seem better, but they also seem to be moving more away from physical books, so but the old ones I had compared to these new ones I've got for Pathfinder, the quality is not the same. The art is great in them too, but that is something that 5e did still have in droves, a lot of great artists there. And the remaster books especially are really well laid out. They've got a nice kind of tab thing on the side which shows you where you are in each chapter and where you need to flick to get to other things, which really helps with navigating. It's very cool, very useful. Beyond that, in those books and on Archives of Nethys and wherever, there's just lots of choices for creating characters, for creating monsters and all sorts, but I'm going to mostly focus on what most people are going to be fussed about, which is character creation. They're always adding new types of character, by that I mean class. In 5e, we got the alchemist, not the alchemist, that's a Pathfinder one. In 5e we got the artificer, and then Matt Mercer's blood hunter, and that's it. Everything else is third party created. We've got a bunch of subclasses which add 3 or 4 things at different levels, and that's about it. Whereas Pathfinder still seems to be putting out a new class at least every year, if not 2 or more. I'm not exactly sure on the numbers, but there's a lot more classes in Pathfinder, and they all feel different, they all feel unique. You have got lots of classics like the fighter, the rogue, the ranger, the monk, but they've also got more unique ones like the investigator, who is kind of like sort of a rogue mixed with Sherlock Holmes, where they can investigate things and look at things that aren't right and come up with stratagems to help them fight their enemies. Or the Magus, who's a spellcaster who infuses their weapon with their magic, so they can do big, heavy attacks, but it's a high-risk reward, because if you miss the attack with your melee weapon, you also miss it with the spell. And the Exemplar, one of the more recent ones, which is straight up like a semi-demigod who has a spark of like a celestial being, which they can switch from their weapon to their armor, to their like gear, and that gives it extra boosts and stuff, and you can use it to use extra powers, and you have to switch it somewhere else. Each class has one kind of core theme that it's based around, which is how it works in 5e as well, but they just really seem to be exploring this in quite a unique way, and they're always coming up with more. One of the ones I'm looking forward to now is they're going to be making a Necromancer class, which is cool because they have ways to essentially be a Necromancer already, but this one will give you a specific system called Thralls, which are your own like mini summons that you can raise, and then you can use them to use greater powers and stuff like that. It's very cool to have this many options already, and for there still to be more options coming. There's just so much creativity, it's really amazing. And beyond that, there's also new ancestries and new not sub ancestries, there's something heritages and backgrounds coming out with every book, and that is something that, we did get a lot more in 5e, but again, just the like way that they do it, the amount of inspiration that they take from different places and different cultures and stuff, into some of the heritages and things like that, where they're inspired by real world mythology in just really clever ways. It's just all really well written, it's very clever. I have a lot of respect for it, even if me being the game master most of the time, I don't actually get to make and play many characters myself. Number 4 is next, so suitably we're talking about the 4 stages of success. Not planned, but hey, works out. Yeah, this makes failing feel less bad, and it makes succeeding feel really great. Essentially, this means that if you succeed on a check by more than 10, or 10 or more, you get a critical success, and if you fail by 10 or more, you get a critical failure. And this works for both characters and for NPCs and for monsters and enemies, everything across the board. So it means if you fail something really bad, that is really dangerous, and if a enemy succeeds on hitting you really hard and gets a 10 plus, and they get a crit, it's always really dangerous. So it makes crits much more likely in this system. But it also makes spells feel better too, as lots of spells are no longer save or suck. They have 4 levels of success. If someone critically succeeds, then yeah, they're going to get off scot-free. But if they succeed, there will usually be still some kind of effect. They'll take half damage, they'll still take the weakest form of the penalty, and so on and so forth. So even though you don't quite get off the spell as strongly as you want to, it still does something, and it still feels better. And it works the same way as well for you, You might save against the spell just about, and it means that you don't take quite as much damage, and that helps instead of you taking a huge amount instead. And that's just really cool. It also means that the crit system feels more rewarding and makes much more sense, because a wizard is not going to be as effective as getting a crit with a sword as a fighter is, because the fighter's modifier is going to be much higher. If an enemy's AC is, say, 15, and the fighter has a +9 and rolls a 16 or 17, then that's a crit for a fighter. The wizard has a +4, they can't get a crit at this level unless they rolled a natural 20. And even if they did, if they had rolled like a natural 20 against a creature that's a much higher level, that would only change it from a miss into a hit, because it just increases the level of success by 1. So if a wizard did hit a AC 15 creature with a crit, with a natural 20, that would make it from a hit to a crit. However, if it was a level 10 creature or something with an AC that was in the 30s, then it is going to hit instead of missing, but because that attack number could never hit a 30, it's going to be max like 24, it's only going to be a standard hit, which just makes a lot more sense, because even if they get lucky, they're not going to be able to stab something super vitally if they're a wizard, unless, they're like a magus or they have properly trained into that. But then if you have a fighter who's able to do a little bit of magic, but a wizard who's able to do magic, the modifiers are likely going to be switched. The wizard's going to be a lot better at casting spells. They're going to have a much higher modifier, and so now they're the one who is more likely to crit, because it is more their area of expertise. Whereas a fighter might be able to blast someone and hit them for, a little bit of fire damage every now and again, but they're less likely to get a crit in the same sense that a wizard is. It just makes sense, and it makes each class and what you're doing feel more specific to you, rather than, hey, I rolled a 20 and I deal as much damage as they did as they rolled a 20, which is fine, but I like the flavour of it better here. For number 5 is the 3-action economy. This is definitely one which gets talked about quite a bit, but it makes sense as to why. It's much simpler than having actions and bonus actions, and then why can't I use a bonus action as an action, or vice versa, and it is just a bit odd and a bit weird. The still reactions make a lot of sense, so they still stick around, but yeah, you just get 3 actions, and that is it. Moving is an action, that's not separate anymore, which means pushing enemies back and away from you is super useful. Getting up is an action, which means tripping enemies is useful. Every time that you force them to do something that they don't otherwise have to do, that is burning one of their actions, which is important because attacking is an action. You don't get one attack, you can make up to 3 attacks on your turn, and sometimes more. You do have multiple attack penalty, which means you're less likely to hit with each consistent hit. But enemies, if you can force them to only get 1 attack instead of 2, because they've got to get back up and move over to you or something like that, or they have an action which takes 2 or 3 of their actions to pull off, like a multi-attack or an attack and a grab or something, and you're penalising them because they've got to spend their actions on other things, that's great. It also means you can cast multiple spells. Lots of spells are 2 actions, but there's some that are 1 action, so you can blast a powerful spell and then cast a shield on yourself, or a focus spell, which is something I'm not even going to go into, but they're really cool as well. And then some actions have a 1 action, 2 action, and 3 action version, like heal. You can heal someone a bit by spending 1 action and touching them, 2 actions, and you can do a ranged heal, which has ability to be up to 30 feet, I think, and does a bit of extra healing, or you can do a 30-foot AoE for all 3 actions, which heals for less, but heals everyone in an AoE around you, though that does include, you know, allies and enemies if there's people in the range. And other spells like that, where they either have different effects or are more powerful than what actions you spend on them. Which is really cool and gives a lot more versatility and a lot more options for the actions. And on that, because of this ability to, you know, moving as an action, opportunity attacks are not something everyone can do here. It means people move more. You don't just stand next to an enemy and flail at them for 5 rounds. There's a reaction called Reactive Strike, which fighters get, and some other classes can get, and some enemies have as well, which makes sense as they are martial characters. They're much more likely to be able to lash out and take advantage on someone than, you know, caster is, or even some more of the mixed martial characters. It gives them more identity and makes martials feel more powerful again, rather than just hitting things harder, but otherwise casters can blast people with spells, but also lash out and quickly hit someone almost just as easily as a martial character can. It again gives them more so their niche, and that's just nice. But it also again means that you are freed up a lot more to move around and to navigate around enemies. There's a step action which you can take, which allows you to essentially do the disengage and move 5 feet away from an enemy, which will often get you out of their threat range. Not always, if they do have a reactive strike, but then you've still got 2 actions left as well. It doesn't burn your whole action unless you're a rogue in 5e, which is also useful. It also triggers this reactive strike on manipulate actions, so if the enemy is casting a spell, you can make an attack if they're within your range. If you get a crit, you interrupt that spell. Awesome. If you've disarmed them last turn and they've got to go pick up their sword, that's a manipulate action. You can hit them then. If you've knocked them over and they have to get up, that's a move. You can hit them then. It really adds to some great combos and the teamwork element that is prevalent in Pathfinder. And on that note, number 7, things like tripping, disarming, and shoving are all unique actions built into the system. There's no homebrewing required. 5e, I feel like, had some of this stuff, but it was never consistent, or it was things that like the Battlemaster could do, or it was full on, like, you could intimidate people as a class feat, or as a class skill for certain classes. It always felt like you had to therefore improv these things if you wanted them to work in other ways, or if people brought them up as just a thing they wanted to try and do. Here, they're just things you can do. You can try and intimidate foes and make them scared. You can try and shove or move people around to give yourself or your allies a flanking bonus, or so they have to move back into combat with you. You can try and recall knowledge to see if you know any of these enemies' weaknesses or any of their strengths or their abilities, and try and learn more. You don't have to use them, but if your players ask about them, then they can do it, and obviously they can do it anyway in 5e and stuff, but here you can just find it on Archives of Nethys or similar, and you don't have to make it up on the spot, so it's consistent. Number 8, I also really love adding your level to stats and the kind of 5 levels of training, which is really 4 levels of training, but then untrained. So you've got untrained, trained, expert, master, and legendary. And this is sort of like a proficiency bonus, but better? When you become trained in a skill, you gain a +2 to that skill, and you also add your level to that skill, and then whatever attribute it's associated with. So acrobatics would be dex, for example. Sounds complicated at first, but it's really not. It's very simple. What this means is, as your level increases, you always gain a +1 to that skill. So at level 1, if you've got 3 dex and you're trained in the skill, that gives you a +2. You're level 1 +1, that's a total of +6. If you're level 2, it's now +7. Level 3, it's now +8. If at level 3 you change the skill from trained to expert, that +2 becomes a +4. Now it's +10. You get the idea. So this means that the numbers do get very big, and honestly, I'd love that anyway. That's just a thing that's fun for me. But it also means that this works on AC as well. This works on weapons as well. This works on everything. And this means that a level 1 creature or commoner isn't going to get lucky and hit a level 10 creature, even if they roll a 20 as a crit, like we talked about earlier. They might get a success if they roll a natural 20, because it increases it from a miss to a hit, but it's never going to be a crit, which just makes so much more sense than running up to like some big enemy and rolling a 20 and then, you know, still doing decent damage to them, which again happens pretty rarely, but you get the idea. This also makes perception separate as a skill to all the other skills, which means people are always trained in it to some extent, which makes sense for adventurers if you think about it, and means people can spend their time focusing on other skills. But all classes will get this training in perception, or they'll be expert in perception at level 1. And the same with the saves. I'm not going to delve into how I think saving throws work better here, because there's only 3 of them and all that stuff, but they do. But everyone always they get 3 saving throws, and you're always trained in them at least, and expert in some of them, which means, again, big numbers. And at some points you're just able to completely negate some lower level enemy effects because you're just too powerful for them now, which feels really great for, you know, characters to just be like, nah, that poison doesn't affect me anymore. That mental attack, I'm absolutely fine. It's just fun and makes characters feel really powerful. And vice versa, obviously. If you try and do it on a much more powerful monster and it just completely brushes it off, then you know, oh, do we want to actually be here? It just really helps with that. Whereas proficiency bonus increasing obviously is fun in 5e, but it happens so inconsistently that your skills and the numbers really don't change that much until you get into the end of the levels, or you take feats, or, you know, you're a bard and you've got jack of all trades and stuff like that, or you've got a rogue and your expertise. Another thing I like is level 1 games still feel really viable in Pathfinder, and I would say probably recommend it. Ancestry gives you hit points, so you aren't as squishy because you get them from your ancestry and from your class and from your constitution. I did a video a few weeks back about how many hit points you could get up to in Pathfinder, and granted that's not quite the same, but check that out if you want to look at kind of how hit points work. But there are also more things you can do, thanks to the variety of actions we talked about earlier, you have immediately at your disposal, but also because you take feats at level 1, and you get things at level 1 which allow you to perform extra actions and do extra things. Each class has like at least a couple of things that they can do in addition to just hit thing or cast spell. And some of the classes in 5e have this as well, obviously, but sometimes it does feel like low level fighters, for example. I run up, I hit them. Okay, my next turn, I hit them. My next turn, okay, I've been hit a couple of times, I'll do action surge. No, I'll do second wind, and then I hit them. And you see what I mean. Whereas fighters here, you can be trying to trip, you can be trying to use your reactive strike, you've got shield block, which means you can spend an action to raise your shield, and then if someone hits you on your turn, you can negate some of that damage, and then you've got whichever other feat you took as well. There's just so much more for pretty much every class to do. Or at least that's how it feels to me. I still play 5e, I still enjoy it, so it's still fun. It didn't become huge just because of things like Stranger Things and stuff. It is a fun system, but I feel like I do see most of the time these days people will start at level 3 or 4 because low level play is freaking deadly. I reran Horde a couple of years ago, Horde of the Dragon Queen, and was surprised how many times the players would be nearly dead or how many players we did lose, because it just, the first couple of like chapters of that, you know, 1 or 2 hits can take out a character. So I do find people mostly start level 3 or 4, you know, even 5 with some of these games for 5e these days, and I've done that too, and that's a lot of fun because you've got these options and you've got, you know, more hit points to deal with. But as long as you're playing it carefully, you can do that at level 1 in Pathfinder. If you're not careful and you're stupid, you might still die. That's still happened. I've still had players make those mistakes, but it feels a lot less likely if you're playing playing safe and playing carefully. And the final thing for now, number 10, because it's already 5 too many, is initiative isn't just based on dex. I believe there was an option in 5e for you to use intelligence instead that I used at one point. But in Pathfinder, it really is depending on how the battle begins. It will often be perception, which, like we said, is a separate skill as mentioned above, but how quickly you know, because of how quickly you notice stuff. But there are ways that you can increase your initiative. There is a feat that allows you to still just get +2 to initiative no matter what it is. Certain classes get abilities that just buff your initiative and make you more likely to react faster. But if you're hiding, you could use stealth as your initiative if you're a rogue or a ranger, and maybe you want to be more in a position where you can come out and flank enemies and surprise them. Or as a whole group if you're trying to do a surprise. If you're attempting to distract a guard or something, maybe you'd roll deception. Or if you're knocking down a door to bash it in to try and attack the enemies, you'd roll athletics. You get the idea. If you aren't hugely perceptive, there might still be options for you to get a different way to get a drop on enemies and give yourself a better bonus for your initiative roll. I really could keep going. I could talk about concentration not really being a thing, law skills allowing you to really specialize in knowing certain things and being really knowledgeable about them, how weaknesses and resistance have a lot more depth here, how modifiers when regulated are actually a lot more interesting than advantage and disadvantage when you have a system where the math is designed to make it work, and how there are a number of optional rules that really add to the game without overcomplicating things, but also aren't needed to have fun or don't feel like the game is missing if you don't use them. But I've already done 5 too many, so I think that's plenty for now. But yeah, I hope this has been interesting. I know it's been a bit rambling all over the place. Like I said, I'll link Archives of Nethys and Path Builder down below. I've used both of them in my videos in the past, so you've probably seen them in places anyway, but they are great resources. If people want, I can definitely do another one of these. Like I said though, it's not reinventing the wheel. People have done plenty of these and I'm sure they've done a lot better. And also, to reiterate again, 5e is still great. I still have a lot of fun and a lot of great memories with the system, and I still use it today. But if I'd known this stuff about Pathfinder sooner, I think I'd have at the very least given it a try before it took a scandal for me to come over and have a look at it. But that's all for today. Thanks for listening and for watching. Please subscribe if you found this interesting. Give the video a like. I'll have another one out in about a week's time, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.